introduction. Today my guest is Esperanza Rosales. Welcome, Esperanza, and we're gonna talk about the art. Esperanza is a gallerist and a global citizen yourself, and I would love to know much more about your journey and the art point of view.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I can say that I'm from New York originally. I studied art there. So I briefly for a time worked in the music industry and then left to pursue further studies in art here in Europe. So I've lived in Europe since 2007 and have been in Norway since 2011. Running a gallery called Sixes and Sevens here in Oslo.
Are you the founder of the gallery?
I am. So I started the gallery. I got to know the Norwegian art scene strangely when I was living in Brussels and working at a gallery there. And I found it to be very unique and, well, refreshing considering the other places that I'd lived. It has developed somewhat differently than other capital cities and, a little bit independently from the rest of Europe, which is interesting. It led to very, very interesting developments.
And that is Norwegian scene?
That's the Norwegian scene, yes.
And with the Sixes and Sevens, so let's start with where we are right now. So right now you are the gallerist of... You founded the gallery Sixes and Sevens.
Yes.
So why is this name?
So the name of the gallery is actually a gambling reference. It is a phrase I sort of came to know, which is used to refer to someone who's at a point of confusion in colloquial English. But it actually has its origins in dice throwing games, or etymologists think that it has its origins in dice throwing games from the 17th century. And I thought that was a sort of interesting idea, this notion of the turning of the die and, 6 being the highest you can roll and 7 being the impossible. So sort of referring to, it came to have a sort of pejorative use because it referred to people who would gamble everything that they had or stake everything they had on the next throw of the die. And I thought, what a beautiful way to think about risk and the putting together the construction of a program and how every consecutive exhibition should be sort of unexpected and you should never really know what you're going to get. So that image of the turning of the die really appealed to me. And also this idea that, what some people view as, total recklessness or stupidity can actually be courage, depending on how it's viewed.
On that note,
yes,
are you staking everything yourself on Sixes and Sevens?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I would like to say that I definitely, we take some risk, and for sure. I mean, I think it's not the kind of program where we kind of sit back and just take things, for example, directly from the studio, things nicely finished and made from the studio straight into the gallery. I think for me, the kinds of shows that tend to be the most interesting are the ones that create a space for something to develop for the artist. And that usually starts with the process and the journey of working towards an exhibition together. So, for example, in our current show, we are exhibiting some fragrances that the artist has made in his studio, but we're also, he and his collaborative partner are developing a fourth. And so that's sort of, it creates, the gallery becomes a studio in a sense. Not with every show, this is to different degrees, but
Who is your current artist?
So we currently have an exhibition with Bjarne Melgaard and also Bjørn Christian Hilberg. He's an olfactory expert and emerging artist who has had a fragrance company for 10 years called Malbrum. And together they've worked on some really beautiful sculpture and fragrance-based works. So it's a beautiful show. It's actually our first show with Björna, so that's very exciting.
With it's very interesting. I'm sitting here being fascinated because also it's the emergence of merging together business and art, but in a different, unexpected form. As the conventional way people seeing artists, okay, well, you know, there is a painting or maybe something, sculpture.
Yeah.
And so a perfume I've never actually thought.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, scent is something that's been approached a little bit in exhibitions over the last years. Not very commonly, but Sissel Tulas, for example, Norwegian artist who's done really exciting things. Basically, I think that, you know, the interesting thing about the gallery is actually value creation, you know, how you can take something, basically an idea, like an artist's idea, and create, you know, a value around that and put a price on that, right? Actually, like why the artwork has relevance is also why it gains value. It's not the thing itself. It might sound a bit simplistic, but it's not the, you know, the physical properties that make it valuable. It's more the cultural relevance. And so that's the process. That's, you know, being a gallerist has a lot to do with that, sort of creating, putting a focus on things so that an audience can really understand what makes an artistic gesture meaningful and also significant, you know. So why are we exhibiting this artist and not that one? Which is a question we often get.
So it's about the story behind the piece.
Definitely, and the connections that it creates for people.
With your journey in the galleries and where you are now, but what, understanding yourself with the experience that you had, why you in it? What makes you happy through that process that you know you have to do?
Well, I suppose good question. I suppose that, you know, art is at the core of my social circle, for one thing. So a lot of the friends that I have and a lot of the people I've sort of now grown into adulthood with happen to be artists. And so in one way, I've sort of almost known nothing else, you know, since a very young age. I really enjoy, like, you know, discussing good ideas with people who are passionate about them, and then of course bringing them into being. So one of the things I wanted to do when I started a gallery was to actually, you know, support projects, help artists to produce new work, so that again, we're not just we're not sort of like packaging something that's ready-made and like bringing it into the gallery. It's more about the sort of process of building something together.
So do you have, would you say you have a residence in the gallery for the artist whilst kind of it's happening?
We kind of have an ongoing dialogue. So, for example, last night I was on the phone with Rob Kulisek, who's a really exciting artist. And he's a photographer who's currently living on a houseboat in southern New Jersey. It's actually a really cool, surfing in the mornings. And we were catching up about, you know, a project that he wants to do, which involves remaking a film from 1937 and having Bjarne actually star in it. So that idea of... Basically, I spend a lot of time in dialogue with the artists and cooking up ideas, and we're basically in the business of helping artists to refine those ideas and helping to put them into production. Yeah.
Would you say, I mean, from everything I'm hearing, it's very entrepreneurial?
Oh, for sure it is. I mean, definitely. You know, one of the things I like about the Norwegian art scene is the fact that people don't take existing models for granted. So what I mean to say is that, the idea of a gallery as we know it is a very sort of a kind of specific thing. A commercial gallery is typically white cube space, a pristine space with white walls. And in Norway, because of historical circumstances that allowed it to develop very differently and independently from the rest of Europe, there aren't as many commercial galleries as there are in other cities of the same size. But what has happened is there's a very high density of artist-run spaces. And that is actually very interesting, because I think this is where you sort of start to see and, can go and experience practices as they are being formed. Artists really exercising their ideas, and also very risk-taking projects. So I have to say that I was very drawn to and attracted to Norway for that that energy, that sort of idea that you can make anything possible, and if the kinds of galleries that you would want to see yourself and your friends shown in don't exist, that you can make them. And that enchanted me, that idea that, that you can put something into being that isn't there. There's a little bit of magic in that, and I really appreciate that about the particular scene that I've been a part of here.
Okay. I have a few questions,
Yes,
and on just to carry on that thought of development with the exciting projects. What's the most exciting project you can now think of that you can realize through gallery and through, but maybe not in conventional way? Maybe if you don't want to say it and share the creative part, what
a good question.
How it's outside of the conventional?
I mean, that's a great question. I have to think. Well, there's certainly a lot of ideas. I'm just trying to sort of nail one that, let me see.
If I say Esperanza, so you had experience, you've done many things in the fine art, there are many things you want to do.
Yes.
In the ideal world, in let's say 5 years' time, where you want to see yourself, and perhaps from creative point of view, where would you be? What you will be doing?
Oh, I have so many plans.
Give me the wildest one, the one that perhaps you wouldn't be able to reach. You're kind of daring to dream of.
The wildest one?
Yeah.
I mean, I think quite certainly it would be no secret to the people that I know that I really would like to, at some point, I think migrate the concept of what we do and merge that with nature. So actually, ideally, we would have a space at some point that allows us to combine, what we do with basically what Norway has so much of, which is incredible and outstanding nature. So who knows? Maybe in the future there isn't going to be a sculpture park, but there's going to be
something.
There's going to be something, and it's going to be, good for the country girl in me.
I'm gonna now go back to the outside, I would say outsider from the art scene, and someone who perhaps goes to galleries time to time and seeing, okay, there is art, there is a lot of skepticism. For example, you will go to some new artist, maybe there is modern, and there is a group of people who say, oh, I can do that. I can do that. What is this art thing people doing? I can do, my kid can do that. And we put it on the wall, and it's like, and then they sell this stuff for so much. I mean, it's like how, okay. And you probably met these people, some of these people.
Oh, for sure, yes. Yeah.
So if we were to explain or kind of just shed a bit more light of the structure, and I know you mentioned about the story, but from the point of from your knowledge as a gallerist, and also you are educated, and it was from what I was digging into from bachelor's and master's in the fine art. So from to your 5-year-old son, right? What would you tell him? Okay, that's how the art works.
Well, it's very easy to think, and also, tempting to sort of move in the direction sometimes of thinking, oh, yeah, I could do that. And I think all of us, we have a little bit of this within us that we also kind of want to try. So the reason, I would say in the simplest of terms, the reason why something in a gallery has the meaning that it does is because, of course, of the artist's intentions. And artists, that is what makes art, that it's intentional. If it's an accident, it's not, I would say, to some extent loses some of its artistic credibility, unless that's part of the concept that the artist has. So, when you see something in a gallery, typically, in a good one, the artist has spent a significant amount of time working on that thing and thinking through all of the possible associations and references, how things connect to each other, and they have an intention. Whether that intention is for people to connect strongly with it or understand it easily is a whole other thing. But you can assume that every single decision has been made by the artist with a specific intention. And so it's a little bit like you can feel like a detective when you go into a space that's new to you, and you can observe and kind of try to find clues, like what can it be saying to you? Or, of course you can enter into a gallery and you can see beautiful paintings or striking work and feel that it moves you physically or emotionally. But if you want to go a little further, you can, do a little thinking, do a little research, and just think about what it inspires. So, by putting an object in a space near something else, for example, what kind of dialogue does that create, or what kind of relationship? And I think if you start to look for clues, or you start that process of allowing yourself to go beyond what you just see, you might find it to be very enriching. And I think the best works, or the works that I find stay with me or move me, are the ones that actually stay with me the longest. So sometimes when we have exhibitions, for example, depending on the artist, you might not know how it's going to look in the end. You might have a few ideas and a roadmap, but some things might end up being a surprise. And I think the works and the shows that have impressed upon me are really the ones that have taken me the longest to figure out. So as I talk to people that come in the gallery, and I try to make a point, because it's not like that everywhere. Thankfully, we live in a place where there's a little bit less people coming in. It means you can spend more time with everyone that does come in. But as I speak to people about the work, I'm also refining those ideas for myself. So, it's a little bit like more about the work yourself, even as a gallerist, halfway through the show than you do at the beginning. So it's a process of course, getting into it and trying to understand the artist's intentions.
So it's very, I would say, enriching process for you, as expanding your own knowledge at each stage.
Definitely it is, yeah.
And with the art that moved you, that you can, and I can only imagine how, because that's your life and you see art, what can you think of recently, maybe, or something, maybe it's one from the past that really moved you?
Well, I think our current exhibition is definitely a project that I can say has taken me by surprise in many ways, partly because it was supposed to, Bjarne approached me about doing this in the gallery or working on this show, it was originally supposed to be a 3-day launch, and somehow a 3-day launch to debut a perfume or some fragrances turned into like a fully fledged exhibition with 17 individual artworks and, pieces that were actually made out of marble and stone. And it became really elaborate, with video work and mannequins, sculptures based on mannequins. There was also an element that really surprised me. So basically I was in my office, we were installing one night, and I heard something fall on the floor, and I thought, oh, I guess somebody dropped a tool. And then I heard like 20 things crashing all at once, and I thought, oh God. So when I went out into the main space, well, let's just say there were things taking place that were not originally part of the plan, but kind of resulted in the destruction of the gallery's floor. And there was a moment where I thought, like a fraction of a second, where I thought, oh my God, my precious, we have a stone floor in the gallery, and I've been, very careful with it for several years. And it only took a moment to sort of recover, because I can, of course, fully understand the artistic process. But that is really memorable for me, because I think the thing that I like so much about the artist's work is that even for someone as open-minded as me, and who's like trained to see the value of like every artistic gesture, and also be able to read that and translate it for a public, it took me a little bit out of my comfort zone for a hair. It was it had that ability to shake me, and I thought nothing could shake me. And that was really nice. That
and
was
you
really
have a
refreshing.
5-year-old.
I do.
That shakes your world, I think, frequently.
He does, for sure. Yeah, and he likes this show. He was trying to make sense of it at first. Yeah.
With this process and the art, and you said all your life been art, and you chose fine art as your bachelor subject. When do you remember was the first moment, I don't know, maybe as a kid, or when it became clear for you that that's the path?
I think I took a little bit of a sideway path into it. I mean, I started, studying art around age 16, and had an interest in it, but also sort of entered into it, in a way that sort of, it wasn't so decisive and all at once. But I started studying art at 16, and I wanted to be a filmmaker, actually. I was thinking a lot about, I was writing scripts, I was working on things, and kind of cutting school and going and hanging out on film sets in New York as like a PA back when that was possible. Yeah, no, I mean, I think for me, a lot of the process of working with art in the beginning for me was also understanding that I myself am not an artist. And, I briefly dipped out of art school. My final year of art school, I took a job working in music management as an assistant to the Strokes. And this was so great because it was actually a chance to hide behind someone else's incredible practice in a supporting role, which taught me a lot about, working with artists of a different kind. But of course, a lot of that was applicable to what I, then later on decided to do. And also, yeah, there was a moment where I realized that I was better at sort of, writing about art and speaking about art than actually making it, or more comfortable, let's say. There's probably a good artist in me somewhere.
I think you're very modest.
Oh, thanks.
From the observation, it's very Norwegian. Like in Norway, there is that janteloven,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And
true.
that's pretty much for someone watching outside of Norway, not knowing about it. It's don't presume that you are better than anyone else in anything else.
Yes.
You're like everyone else. So And I feel, interestingly, it's a wonderful thing for society, but also it sometimes stops people of kind of going that up and maybe saying, yeah, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to be better. I'm gonna try to be that pioneer in this something and give it a shot.
Yes, absolutely. I think that it creates a little bit, it's definitely, it for sure has shaped a lot of really positive things, or things that are so positive for society here. But of course, I do think it also creates this sort of like uniformity, which is difficult. It's maybe more difficult to be like as expressive within that. So yeah, it's interesting. It does seem like that is one of the things that makes the visual arts in Norway quite interesting, because it goes against the grain of that a little bit. Yeah.
I'm gonna raise one more question that is almost art related, but also touches on another note, and it's art, money, investment. Everyone, and now it's such a hyped up subject on the technology, and we've got NFTs, but generally people just wanting to generate wealth, perhaps through investing into art. What's your advice for somebody who is maybe sitting on their money and they think they've never done it before but want to try in that space and that angle of art?
So I think that good advice for someone who is looking to invest in art for the first time would be to find someone you trust to work with on that, if you haven't taken those steps before. That can be, of course, a gallerist or an advisor, but I think there are different ways to approach that. But bear in mind, I think it's a little bit high risk, to think that the art market operates very differently than certain other markets, and there are other factors, of course. I guess what I would say is, I think the thing that you can gain the most from art is the experience of being with it, and if you gain nothing else monetarily, you still have that. So my advice would be to also invest in things that you yourself feel connected to. Of course, we can all make money, buying blue chip artists and well-established artists, but hopefully there's more to take from it than that. And I personally think it's very exciting to support younger practices. If you see an artist who's doing interesting things, why not support that and sort of help to shape an artist's create a better chance for an artist to succeed.
So, you said one path is going to the gallerist.
That's one path.
Let's say somebody watched the podcast and they're like, you know what? Maybe I will follow that path, and I want to come to. I feel connected to Esperanza, so I'm coming to you. Hello, Esperanza. Very nice to meet you. I've listened to that podcast. I kind of understand. I really don't know nothing about art, but I want to be part of it. As a gallerist, how can you guide me as a client? What would you do? And I say I have maybe a budget. There is a certain amount of money that I want to, invest in the art. Would you be able to do that? Or?
Absolutely. So budget is a very good, starting point, of course, but also to understand what is meaningful for you. So, you find a starting point together, whether that be through a particular medium. So, for example, maybe somebody is more interested in collecting video or sculpture than painting. They're basic ways to start. And I think, of course, trying to find personal preferences together. So it's a process, right? And any gallerist or advisor would be able to gather a selection of works and sort of say, how do you feel about this? And then see where it leads. I think also going around to see art together is a really good first step. So, go and see 5 or 6 gallery shows together, maybe a couple museum shows, and just sort of see how you yourself respond in the presence of certain kinds of work. And that's a great way to develop, a shared understanding of what your preferences are.
And with that point, with NFT, right, non-fungible tokens and art, have you dealt with any digital art, or this is just a bit different medium?
I have some experience with it. I have always tried to keep a little bit of an arm's length. I think there's of course interesting things that can be done with it when artists are thinking critically and also conceptually about what an NFT and what a digital experience can be, and all of the topics that are raised by that format. But I still think, I don't know, maybe it's a bit old-fashioned, but I do still want to have experiences like physical experiences in real space, in real time, with real people. And also, I think, one of the things that's so interesting about being involved in artistic practices with artists who are still alive is that you're able to actually share space together, whether that be with the artist's latest work or through conversations after an opening. And I think that's why a lot of people are actually in it. And so, NFTs, I don't know, I'm not always that convinced.
So for younger people, if they don't have culture of going to the galleries, perhaps yet, or just, I think for some maybe it's taken from the family, this is a normal thing to do. But for someone who is not so used to that, from your experience, is gallery a place to connect with people as well as art?
Yeah, I think it's one of the places to connect, certainly. And other places can be artist studios or at, events that are held outside. There are a lot of, festivals outdoors in different cities where you can see art outside of traditional gallery spaces. Tons of performance practices that are also maybe not necessarily taking place inside of a gallery. I think there is a very attractive the social side of a gallery space is a very attractive space, but it is also a little intimidating sometimes for people. So it can be a starting point.
Do you always dress up? Or do you feel people always dress up going to the art gallery?
Well, not necessarily, but there are people, you'd be surprised, there are some people who are a little afraid to come in. Okay. Not, this is, it's, sometimes people feel they need to have a sort of special knowledge base to understand what's taking place. And I think it's much easier for people who are traveled and international and have come into contact with art and culture extensively before to, walk past a gallery and think, I'm going to go in here. There are some people who feel a little bit of pressure, like they feel, it's almost like, maybe they would be reluctant to go in because they feel like they have to buy something. And if they're not going to buy something, why would they, they have no business there. So there's, of course that's not everyone, but it's safe to say that there's definitely that faction in the public.
Thank you, Esperanza. It was very nice to get to know the art scene. I know there is so much more, but
I feel like we can have definitely more conversations.
Yes. Thank you for today. And
my pleasure.
Yes, until next time.
Until next time.